All right, folks. Welcome to Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses AGM, our annual meeting of everybody, always happening in early January. This is 2021. And as you can see, we are online using Zoom and recording from there. So we're going to try to keep things short and sweet this year. But yeah, really excited to have everybody online. Getting to see faces. I know we've done lots of calls throughout the year that are just audio, but it's nice to just touch base a little bit more human. So my name is Mike Carlson. I'm Director of Operations for Doctors for Doctors. I've been in the organization for about 6 years, 6 or 7, depends on how you count. And I do a lot of the, keeping the lights on for the organization and fundraising and the communications stuff, help out with that too. So that's what I am up to and who I am. We're going to go through our team and introduce some folks here, and then we'll end with Andrew, the founder. So Ahmed, do you want to introduce yourself there?
Hello, yes. My name's Ahmed. I'm a doctoral candidate at the University of Toronto. I've been with the organization for 5 years now, and I'm currently serving as the Director of Research. And most of my work focuses around supporting the students that we sponsor to the best of my abilities.
Awesome, thank you very much. We'll go over to Gabrielle.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle. This will be my 3rd year with the organization, I believe, if I'm counting correctly. And I've been involved in fundraising, communications a little bit, and I'm looking to expand my role a little more here this year.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Gabrielle. Let's go over to Denise down in Nicaragua.
Hello from down here. Yes, I am the in-country person, the Nicaragua Executive Director, and I've been with DFD for the last couple of years. It's been a real joy to be working here with the students. Now, 2 out of 3 are now doctors, and really looking forward to a new year of new projects and keeping our previous ones going.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Denise. Let's go over to Luz.
Hi, so I'm Luz. I've been with DFD for I think 5 years. It's been a while, but I'm super happy to still be here. And well, what I've done, I've done a few things. I've helped with research, also helped with translation and communicating with the students since I speak Spanish. And yeah, just trying, also helping a little bit with the development of programs for the students this year.
Awesome. Thanks, Luz. Let's go over to Abdel with Lainey on deck.
Hi, so my name is Abdel. I first became involved with DFD about 3 years ago, initially in an outreach and events role. But since the COVID-19 pandemic has started, I've kind of shifted more into a communication support role, and I'm looking forward to getting more involved.
Awesome. Thanks, Abdel. Lainey with Mars on deck. Lainey, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Lainey. This is my first time working with DFD. I've only been doing it for a couple of months, but I'm enjoying it so far. I've been helping with fundraising as well as transcribing and translating audio calls that we've been doing with students. And yeah.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Lainey. Mars, do you want to introduce yourself here?
Hi, I'm Mars Riddell. So I have been with DFD for a couple of years, and primarily responsible for communications, distributing, more recently providing content and distributing the sort of quarterly newsletter, as well as liaising with our various directors to get updates on their activities and how those could translate to for our audiences and our donor base.
Last but not least, let's throw to Andrew.
Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Wilson. I'm the founder of DFD. I have been here for 11 years. I guess I founded the organization in 2010. When I was in first year chiropractic college. Now I've been practicing for 6 years. So, yep, 11 years, time flies. And then this year is, I think it's going to be a bit of a directional shift. As Denise mentioned, two of our students, our Nicaraguan students, have now graduated and become medical doctors down in Nicaragua. And so we still do have one student who's in his 5th year, and I'm hoping to sponsor another student in the next couple of years or so as it kind of goes. But right now, our focus is really looking towards supporting our medical doctors in Nicaragua, which feels really odd to say and really good. So what we do as an organization, just to go back, is we support local leaders in small communities in Nicaragua who want to become medical doctors. We support their full education in Nicaragua so they can graduate as medical doctors and then continue to support them in lifelong relationships after they're done school. And so right now that two of our students have become medical doctors, we're going to be working with them this year to be reaching out to their communities, as well as having calls with them online ongoing to just help patients out as much as they can as well. In the previous years, our focus has been more on fundraising for students, supporting our students as they're going through school, connecting our students. And now we're getting out of that model and we're starting to focus on what I think is going to be actually the bulk of what Doctors for Doctors is and what it's always been about, which is supporting them as doctors working in smaller communities, giving healthcare to people that don't have great access to healthcare, and stepping up as leaders in their communities. So that's the stuff that's the meat and potatoes. That's the stuff I'm really excited about, and that's just really beginning in the coming years. Of course, with our Nicaraguan executive director Denise, and with all of our help here in Canada, there's a lot of people working on the project in different components of everything, from actually talking to our students, working with them, listening to them, making sure that they're being heard, to telling their stories, to fundraising for them back in Canada. And that's what we did a lot of this weekend at our annual general meeting. And then I'd like to just do a bit of an overview of what we're going to be doing concretely on the ground in Nicaragua this year, and just kind of mention who's working on what project, if that makes sense to everyone. Yeah. So I think one of the big ones here is supporting Brandon in his 5th year of school. Our biggest risk as an organization is always, only halfway sponsoring a medical student in Nicaragua. So, to tell someone that they're going to be going to medical school, to train them up, it takes a long time. We're looking at anywhere from 6 to 8 years, depending on the specialty that they choose and things like that. So that's always been our biggest risk in the organization. We do only have one more student left, and that's Brandon. So we do owe payments for him this year. Making sure that we have the money for that, that's Mike. He looks at our bank accounts. He makes sure that all the costs are going to work out. We can support him this year. And then working with him directly on the ground, that's Denise. And Denise also works with our local partners, the Foundation of Gene Brugger in Nicaragua. But what they do is they listen to Brendan. They give him extra supplies if he needs them. Sometimes, an extra textbook comes up or something like that. Now, in that case, what we would do is actually go to volunteers like Ahmed and Gabrielle and Abdel and Luz and Lainey and Mars and say, let's talk about what our student needs, what Brandon needs for his 5th year, and let's put the word out and try to get some funding for that. And then we redirect, we direct that funding down to Nicaragua and support our student. So that's the first and most important thing that we're going to do this year, is support Brandon in his 5th year of medical school. The second thing is our doctors that have graduated. So Brian and Kimberly and Brandon, who's working in the hospital, sometimes they need personal protective equipment, especially in, there's still COVID-19 pandemic going on. It looks like it's going to be going on in Canada for a while. It looks like it's going to be going on in Nicaragua for probably a bit longer. We want to make sure that our doctors are supported and that they have all the supplies that they need. And so if anything comes up with that, we make sure that we have the funding for them as soon as possible, and we get them that funding right away. So that is, Denise makes sure that we have that our students always have somewhere to reach out to. And then, all the fundraising for that comes from the rest of the team, and the communication of that comes from Mars. And then we send that funding back down as soon as possible. The third thing that we're doing is continuing to build togetherness between our doctors and our students. This is really, really important, that they like hanging out, that they like sharing information, because we work together to help patients. And if Kimberly or Brian or Brandon has a really good idea, the other two or any other doctors that come on in the future can use that idea and help their communities with that same idea. So working together is something that we really believe in here in Canada, and it's extremely important for doctors to communicate and work together, especially when they are all really passionate about rural healthcare and their local communities. So facilitating that togetherness, usually we can go down to Nicaragua in person and have a dinner and things like that. We can't do that, of course, in the pandemic, so that's not looking like a go this year. But we're brainstorming other ways of doing that, like holding a dinner for them for online and creating a budget around that. So that's something that's likely going to happen this year as well, and that's an extremely important part of what we do, is facilitate that togetherness for our students. The next thing is our medical outreach programs. So Kimberly, Brian, and Brandon have all participated in an example is called Days for Girls. They go to a small community with a bunch of young women in it that don't have access to consistent healthcare and education, especially around sexual and reproductive health. And our students and our doctors will actually go to those small communities and educate them. And usually there's small handouts as well for the young women, but talk to them about what their sexual and their reproductive health needs are, which is extremely important, especially in Nicaragua, where the average age of first conception for a lot of women is quite younger than in other countries, often in teenagers and things like that, depending on in the community and in the town. So this work is something that's really important to continue to fundraise for. Denise is part of the execution of that. And so are our local partners. The Foundation of Jean Brugger have been a huge supporter of that program as well since it started years ago, because even Kimberly and Brian would do it as students in second year and third year. Yeah, so what I'm going to do now is just share with everyone a history of the Doctors for Doctors organization from its very far origins and beginnings to its present. So let's go through that together.
Well, thanks for joining me, everyone. I'm Andrew Wilson, the founder of Doctors for Doctors, and I'm going to be taking us all through the history of Doctors for Doctors from past to present, just so you have a better idea of how we formed and what we do today. So it really all started before Doctors for Doctors even started. I first went to Nicaragua to shadow a physiotherapist who you can see here. Her name is Maria. So she was actually the reason I went to Nicaragua originally in 2008. I went back in 2010 to shadow her some more, just to learn about how she was a physiotherapist who worked in different rural communities. One of the most interesting things I found when I was working with her was that her role as a physiotherapist, what she usually did most of the time, she was acting as kind of a makeshift nurse. And a lot of the communities that we went to and throughout rural Nicaragua really didn't have access to ongoing, consistent healthcare. So any healthcare professional that would walk through the area, they would always ask them questions about whether they could take these pills because they, the bottles were in English and they didn't speak English. So they would ask Maria for help with that. Or they would ask for help with, one of their children had a fever, or one of their children had bed bugs or something like that. So they would ask Maria to help out with that kind of stuff. And I realized that, even though physiotherapists or anyone doing musculoskeletal healthcare is really important in these rural settings, what they often lacked as well was primary healthcare, right? So they lacked doctors and nurses that were there in a consistent way. When I lived with Maria, I met someone that really changed my understanding of what I thought we could do in this situation. I met someone that was really passionate to go to school and become a medical doctor and then go back to their rural community so that they could give healthcare to them in a consistent way. And that's where the idea of Doctors for Doctors came from. This is a photo of me with Maria's family. So those are her 3 children there. They're all grown up now. This was over 10 years ago. But I would teach them English and they would teach me Spanish in return. It was really, really nice. I got to stay with them for about a month over the time. So what I did with that information when I got back, I just started my first year in chiropractic college. And this is a photo of a group of folks in my chiropractic college that I convinced to do a marathon with me. A lot of people ran 5K or the half marathon, or a few people even ran the full marathon. And we ended up fundraising over $9,000 for that first student to go to medical school in Nicaragua. When I held interviews for the position, 12 people applied, and 8 of them were really good, qualified candidates that were from rural areas that wanted to go to medical school, that wanted to go back to their rural areas so that they could give sustainable health care. And that's when I realized that I didn't just meet the one person in Nicaragua that happened to want to go to med school from a small community, that it was really a systemic issue. This has been going on for a really long time, probably a long time before me. And I realized by how many applicants that had applied to us that this was a big deal, that I needed to start a whole organization, which I really didn't want to do at the time. I just wanted to connect with another organization that was already in Nicaragua. But nothing did this. Nothing addressed this issue. I saw, charities that really worked to address education and just sponsored students. But once the students graduated, there was no support there. And then I saw a lot of short-term medical trips, things like for nurses or for doctors working in different communities, often from international places. Those were the 2 main camps of charities that I saw in the area. I didn't see anything that connected the 2. So what I thought was, well, I'll sponsor the student who wants to go to medical school, and then I really want to keep in touch with them for the rest of their lives. Like, I want to help them out however they can help their community. Maybe there's something to fundraise for that, or maybe they'll graduate and they'll work in a clinic right near their community or something like that. And that's how the idea of Doctors for Doctors began. It developed out of need. There was nothing else that addressed the same issue, so we started it. This was our first student. We teamed up with the foundation of Gene Brugger. You can see their logo in the background. They are a specialist in Nicaragua in education. They've sponsored hundreds of students, and they had never sponsored a medical student before we came along. And we worked with them to develop a medical school scholarship program. And Brian was our first selected student out of the whole group. And we selected him based on 3 things. We selected him based on his leadership, like the leadership that he demonstrated in his community. So his volunteer history, his ideas of how he wanted to step up into his community as a leader as well. Like that to me is the most important part. So leadership. The other thing that we select our students based on is we have to make sure that their grades are good enough, right? That they're from small communities. So, when a small community lacks healthcare, it also usually lacks education as well. Like, they don't have big schools in them as well, right? So the students that we sponsor also have to have the history and the aptitude to go to medical school and become good doctors when they graduate. So that's the second thing, is their grades. And then once they meet the minimum standard. And then the third thing is financial need. So they have to be from small communities where, the students aren't going to just go to medical school on their own. They actually need financial assistance to go to medical school. And based on those 3 criteria, and a couple of interviews and written answer questions and things like that, Brian was the best student, and we selected him, and he's been absolutely a fantastic student and representative of what Doctors for Doctors is and what it can be. So he was our first student, and he has since graduated, I am very happy to say. After we sponsored him in 2012, we communicated by letters for the first few years, where, a few times a year he would write letters to us. We would write them back. just updating us on how he was doing, the volunteer work he was still doing, even when he was in school with his community, and how he was giving back, and the struggles and the trials of being in medical school as well. It's very taxing for everyone, no matter what country you're in. So in 2014, I went down and I got to visit Brian at his school. So that's us there. And when we were there, we got to actually see, him going into medical courses. We got to meet his family and actually go with Brian to his community, and just meet other people in his community that were so excited that he was going to school. We met his family. His younger sisters were really excited to go to school one day as well. Brian was the first person in his family to ever go to school after high school, so it was a really big deal for them. In 2014, we decided that we were going to sponsor another student. So we did a fundraising campaign, and we fundraised over $20,000, which allowed us to sponsor Kimberly to go to medical school. So Kimberly was our next fantastic student. So she's seen here outside of the foundation of Gene Brugger again. That's their logo in the background. Kimberly has just such an incredible work ethic, such an inspiring story. Based on those three criteria that I talked about before, she blew them all out of the water. And she is in medical school in the public institution in Nicaragua. And to get into the public institution in Nicaragua, you have to be one of the smartest people in the country. So she is very, very bright, very high potential young leader in her community, has a huge history of volunteer work. She's absolutely fantastic to work with. And I'm just grateful that I get to hang out with these doctors and that I get to know them. They're wonderful, wonderful people. We did another fundraising campaign as well, and we ended up sponsoring Brandon I believe it was 2016. And this is a photo here of Brandon with our local partners, the Foundation of Gene Brugger. This is Vilma, who was their executive director. And this was our programs director at the time, Sarah. So, and this is Brandon here sitting in the chair. So this is us just meeting up with them. And Brandon is our third medical student, and he's in medical school now. We went back down again in 2019, and this time what we realized was our students were starting to graduate, right? Our medical students, at this point, we had just really been a medical scholarship charity. All of our money that went down to Nicaragua went to funding the medical education of these three really bright young Nicaraguans. What we realized was, at some point here, we're going to need an executive director on the ground in Nicaragua because our students are going to become doctors and they're going to need a coordinator. So this is me and the Doctors for Doctors students interviewing different candidates to become their executive director. So this is me, and you can see Kimberly here. We sat in a cafe in Managua and we interviewed people for 2 days straight. After that, the students chose Denise. So Denise is she's lived in Nicaragua for over 20 years now. She's a professional international development worker with different charities and institutions over the years. And she works for us part-time as our Nicaraguan executive director. She connects with all of our doctors and our students and makes sure that they're well taken care of, that all their needs are being met. And she's just absolutely wonderful to work with. And she supports our students really well. So I'm happy that they chose her, and they seem really happy too. This is just this past year, our first student graduated. So this is Brian with his diploma. And this marked a major transition in our organization. At this point, we still want to sponsor more students potentially in the future, but that first slide that you saw, lifelong, local, life-saving, those are the three main core values of what Doctors for Doctors is. And so for us, sponsoring Brian as a medical student is really just the first phase of what we're doing. And it's really a temporary phase. After that, he's a doctor for the rest of his life, and we want to stay in touch with him, and we want to help him support his communities as much as possible. So this is just Brian getting his diploma there, but it did mark this massive transition in our organization. Now, what we do in Nicaragua with our doctors and our students, these are just a couple of slides of what we're up to right now, how our students are helping their communities, even as students before they become doctors. And then we're just getting into the stage right now where they're going to, learn how to help as doctors. So this is a photo here of Kimberly running a project called Days for Girls. Now, in this project, what she does is she goes out to different rural communities where there's a lot of young women aged from, anywhere from 8 to 16, 17, 18, that want to come and learn about sexual and reproductive health and women's health. There is not a ton of access in these communities to this level of information. And the level of information that comes with no judgment from a healthcare professional, where it's going to be accurate, it's a really big deal, especially in small communities where the average age of first conception, the first pregnancy age, is often in the teenagers, right? So Kimberly wanted to educate a lot of these younger women, ideally before that first conception happens, the first pregnancy happens. So Kimberly goes out to these communities and she gets a group of young women, and then she educates them on women's sexual health and reproductive health. We even give out different samples of things, everything from menstrual health and healthcare around that, to learning how to put on pads in your underwear when you're having a period. So Kimberly works in these communities to help educate these young women, and it's such a fantastic program that she's a part of. And it's really cool to see Kimberly get so excited about it. She loves running these programs. So this ongoing medical outreach project, that's just one example. But our doctors and our students are going to frequently be reaching out to different rural communities to give them healthcare in the best way possible. Next, we have our monthly medical discussions. So this is something that is called Project Echo. What this is our doctors in Nicaragua and our students in Nicaragua and myself and another Canadian medical doctor will get on the phone over Zoom, and we'll have a call to discuss best practices in medicine for how we can help our patients. So this is a shared learning experience that we meet monthly, and we really get to connect and share information. The main theory behind this is everybody teaches and everybody learns. So I love these calls personally because I always learn something new about them, about healthcare, and from local context to the patients that I work with here in Canada. It's always fantastic. And everybody has such a different perspective, right? Our Canadian doctor who works in an emergency room comes from such a different perspective than myself, who works in musculoskeletal healthcare as a chiropractor, who has such a different perspective than a Nicaraguan medical student in third year medicine or fifth year medicine, and who has such a different perspective from a graduated practicing Nicaraguan medical doctor in the hospital, right? So everybody has such different perspectives, and it's really fun. It's really beneficial for us to share and connect like that with our students. So this brings us to what our charity actually does. I like the idea of telling the story first, so you understand where I'm coming from when I tell you what our mission is as a charity. In Doctors for Doctors, what we do is we sponsor young leaders to go to medical school in Nicaragua, and then we work with those doctors to increase access to rural healthcare in Nicaragua. And we do that by empowering those young leaders to be agents of change in their communities. So you can really see how every word in that makes sense when you understand the history of how Doctors for Doctors evolved. And that's why I wanted to put together this video today. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.
Thanks so much, Andrew, for all that info. Again, we want to transition to the Canadian side. Trust is such a backbone of organizations such as ours that rely on donations from our donor base, from our monthly donors, from the organizations, the Rotary clubs that support us and our programs in Nicaragua. And so in order to keep that trust, we want to make sure that our financial health and our finances are 100% transparent. So every year we go through the finances in detail with everybody, just to make clear where our organization is at, where your donations are going, and answer any questions that are coming up for the folks in the organization, as well as external. So obviously this year was a little bit trickier, so we can't, have a big gathering and share Nicaraguan food with people. But I will open it to questions later on. Before we get into the finances, as director of operations, I just wanted to share that the sort of pivot in operations this year is going to be for storytelling. And I think 2021 is going to be a year where we hopefully all understand and pivot to telling our stories better. That's in the organization, but also of the students and the things that we're doing on the ground. I think we have been reviewing what we need to do over and over, and it just keeps coming back that we need to share what we do more with people. And so our fundraising is going to shift to really storytelling. And the more content and the more that we can get out there and put what we're doing and our students are doing out there, the better. And so that's going to be the major shift in Canadian operations this year, and hopefully everyone integrating that a little bit more into their roles. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We'll see how this works with, I'm not going to share sound, and I'm optimizing for video clip. Sure. All right. Everybody, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see this? Perfect. So I'm going to minimize that for the moment. So here's what we have for our finances. These are our financial, like our summary of finances, our cash flow statement, and our balance sheet. And so we just want to go through that in detail. So first things first, we can see that our income this year has dropped from previous years. It was sitting at about 15,000 in previous years. It's dropped to about 9. Now, our general donations, we got about $5,000 from Canada Helps. That's our main source of income, as well as one random transfer from IBM, which I'm sure was someone donating to us. Hopefully they confused us with Doctors Without Borders, or hopefully they knew about us, actually. But, however that money came over to us, great, we'll take it. And then I do always need to explain this. There's an in-kind donation that's happening. We have a bunch of stuff, postcards, mugs, other things. We used to run meetings like the AGM out of this apartment that I'm in. And so that is an in-kind donation of space for about $4,000 a year. It works out to about $330 a month. And so that's kind of us renting it. Now that donation ends up being an expense. So it's like written off the books. It allows for anybody who is working with a charity to donate their space and kind of give up that rent for an actual tax receipt. So that's what's happening there. So that 4,000 isn't real income; it's an in-kind donation of space for the charity. So in reality, we're making about $5,000 cash from general donations for the year. To move on to expenses, as we scroll down there, we had about $1,500 go to our executive director, Denise, for administrating the student program this year, which is an increase from about $900 last year, but I think also makes sense and is well within budget ranges. Our student Brian had $0 this year because he graduated. Kimberly was just under 3,000. And Brandon was around 5,500, about 6,000. So you can see the difference there in how much Brandon cost relative to Kimberly, which is wild. There's a reason why we want to sponsor students in the public schools with tuition being lower. That's basically it. It's more than double the cost to support Brandon each year. In addition, we had a new expense, the amount of money that we supported students with, that was about $500. That was just ongoing costs to make sure that they're safe, like PPE, in this wild COVID time. About $200 in banking fee, or sorry, in to run Canada Helps and to collect that money. $80 in banking fees, which is an increase because our accounts are now not free, but such is life. We actually spent $0 on operations throughout the year. So any other expenses were really cut to zero. And we spent about $500 on the AGM, which was expected in January. And this is just the equivalent in-kind rent payments for the in-kind money that we make. So, or the in-kind donations that we are given. So in terms of income and expenses, so our expenses range about $15,000. And again, our total income is about $9,000. So we are about $6,000 short. So I just want to get into the assets and liabilities piece. So in the bank right now, we have about $6,000 Canadian. We have about 2,500 American. All told, we have about $10,000 Canadian. So I like to think we have 10 grand in the bank, and our deficit this year, so how much we spent $6,000 more than we made, but we still have $10,000 in the bank. Our liabilities, we have about $14,000 still to give to Brandon over time. And so just looking at those numbers, we're about $4,000 in the hole. Now, next year, we should fundraise our way out of that, and then we shouldn't have any more liabilities or any more outgoing future payments than we have cash. So we're going to be net positive. That estimation of future liabilities has changed widely as we've known more information and we understand actually how much money it takes to put students through university. And so finally, again, our net cash flow was negative $6,000, which sounds like a lot, but also we knew we have this money in the bank from previous crowdfunding campaigns, etc. We have about 10 grand in the bank. So right now, overall, if the organization closed down, we would not be able to afford about $5,000 worth of Brandon's education, assuming that we would want to pay for that, which I think we would. So that's that. I'll stop now and just ask if anybody has any questions so far on our cash flow.
I just wanted to point out one thing about Brandon's education, that it was about $14,000 of expected expenses for Brandon over the next 3 years. So it's not an urgency, that's being created there. Just to add that.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Yeah, it's about $5,000 a year over the next 3 years. And I'm going to share. Once that goes away, that's always so annoying at the top. Our operating budget. So our budget for this coming year is pretty low key. Again, in the time of COVID, there's not a lot of radical things we can do. I do think we missed out on a couple funding opportunities. So we're certainly going to have the in-kind rent. We're also going to have Rotary Club donations, which we should get for $2,000 for Brandon. My hope is that we can get another $1,000 of donations on top of that. And increase our Canada Helps donations slightly to $6,000. So that would be the dream there, and I think is fair because that's been inching up slowly over time. So our expected income for 2021 is about $13,000. That includes the in-kind $4,000. If we look at the expected expenses, the $4,000 in rent for the in-kind, then I am budgeting $250 each for Brian and Kimberly for just extraneous expenses, PPE, things that they might need. Brandon's going to be about $5,000. Denise budgeting $2,000 in case we need it. As well, $300 for this AGM or future retreats, just in case we do need it. banking fees, a few other minor expenses, working out to about 12,000. I think this is fair. I sat with this and thought about it. It does include an extra 500 buffer for students, and would make sense since we're also not paying Kimberly's fees, and that is done. So all in all, with that, with 13,000 being coming in as income and 12,000 going out, it'll be about even this year. That is what I expect. Again, we might be a couple grand short, which I think is again okay because we do have 10 grand in the bank. So that's just a quick conversation about the budget. I think it is reduced from previous years, but I think our scope is also reduced. Thank you so much. And I guess I will pass it over to Denise. Denise, do you want to give your update now?
Sure. Yeah, it was a good year despite everything, between the pandemic and 2 hurricanes in quick succession. Our students, thankfully, were fine during the hurricanes, despite the flooding. And the pandemic, because it had hit Canada first, DFD was out ahead of the game, and in terms of supplying the personal protective equipment for the students who didn't yet have access to it. It was same as usual in terms of virtual communication with the students, even for me in Manawa, because they're in other towns, other areas of the country. And in terms of the hurricanes, the cleanup and rebuilding is ongoing. It's not going to be easy, but especially in the current situation, but it will be done.
I just wanted to say great update, Denise. Sorry for putting the pressure on you to give an update on an entire country as well. I appreciate that you do. And it's good for context because it's really hard for us to know what's actually going on the ground in Nicaragua. So anything that you say is like, we always hang on to it, right? So thank you.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll stop recording here. Thanks again for everyone joining us, and look forward to 2021.